I stared at my acceptance letter to the London School of Economics, my hands trembling. This was my dream. But I already knew what would happen when I showed it to my parents. In our Indian family, there was only one acceptable path: medicine. Just like my father, his father, and my older sister Priya. What is this nonsense? My father's voice boomed through our living room as he scanned the letter, his face darkening with each word. Business school. Economics? Have you lost your mind, Arun? My mother sat quietly in the corner, wringing her hands in that familiar way she did when conflict brewed. The evening sun cast long shadows across our living room, where countless family photos showed 3 generations of doctors in pristine white coats. I want to build something of my own, Dad. Create businesses, help entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs? He spat the word like it was poison. You want to throw away our family legacy to become what? A shopkeeper? Your sister is already a successful surgeon. Why can't you follow her path? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Because it's not my path. I've never wanted to be a doctor. You've known this since I was 12. Known what? That you prefer to waste time with your silly business ideas. That startup club you waste time with at school. He crumpled my acceptance letter, tossing it aside. No son of mine will become a common businessman. You will apply to medical school, or what, Dad? His eyes turned to steel. Or you are no longer my son. No more tuition, no more support. You'll be cut off completely. My mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Please, Beta, listen to your father. Medicine is a noble profession. Think of the family name. I looked around the room, at the family photos, the medical degrees lining the walls, the expectations weighing down every inch of space. For 18 years, I tried to fit myself into their mold, but I couldn't do it anymore. I'm sorry, I said, picking up my crumpled acceptance letter. But I'm going to London. Then get out, my father roared, pointing to the door. Don't come back until you've come to your senses. I climbed the stairs to my room one last time, packing what I could into a single suitcase. As I walked out the front door, I heard my mother crying softly. My father stood rigid, arms crossed, watching his disappointment of a son walk away. I had $3,000 saved from my part-time job at a tech startup and a dream that burned brighter than their disappointment. That night, I slept on my best friend Dev's couch, my acceptance letter clutched to my chest. The next morning, my sister Priya called. Mom and Dad told me what happened. Are you really choosing this over family? I'm choosing myself, Priya, for once in my life, she sighed. You're making a huge mistake, little brother. Without family support, without their connections, you'll fail. Come home, apologize, apply to medical school. It's not too late. I ended the call, knowing it would be years before I spoke to any of them again. 2 weeks later, I boarded a flight to London with my savings, 2 suitcases, and an unwavering determination to prove them all wrong. The first year was brutal. I worked 3 jobs: barista in the morning, tutor in the afternoon, warehouse worker at night, just to afford a tiny room in a shared flat. Between shifts, I threw myself into my studies, determined to top every class. But it was during my barista shifts that I noticed something: countless busy professionals wasting their mornings in line for coffee. That's when the idea hit me. What if there was an app that let them pre-order, pay, and skip the line? I spent 6 months developing a prototype, learning to code from YouTube videos during my brief breaks between work and study. By my second year, my app Skipline had caught the attention of a small tech incubator. They offered me seed funding, enough to quit my jobs and focus on the business full-time. I lived on instant noodles and worked 18-hour days, but Skipline was growing. Then came the breakthrough. A major coffee chain wanted to pilot Skipline in their London locations. The day we launched, I stood in the corner of their busiest store, watching people walk in, grab their pre-ordered drinks, and leave with smiles on their faces. My simple idea was actually making lives better. Word spread. More chains signed up. Venture capitalists started calling. By graduation, Skipline was operating in 3 countries, and I had raised $10 million in funding. My tiny flat became a real office with a growing team of developers and sales staff. Every time we expanded to a new city, I thought about calling home. Every time we hit a new milestone, I drafted emails to my parents that I never sent. Their words still echoed in my head. You'll fail without us. But I hadn't failed. Far from it. 5 years after walking out of my parents' house, Skipline had expanded beyond coffee into retail, restaurants, and services. We had millions of users across 12 countries. The company had built from nothing was now valued at over $500 million. I moved from my cramped flat to a penthouse overlooking the Thames, bought my first sports car, started investing in other startups, helping young entrepreneurs like my younger self. But I kept my success quiet. No flashy interviews, no social media posts. I let my work speak for itself. Then came the day that would change everything. A notification popped up on my phone. Skipline was launching in my hometown, partnering with every major restaurant and retailer in the area, including the coffee shop where my parents had their morning ritual. To be continued. I hadn't planned on returning home like this. My private jet touched down at the small regional airport, the Skipline logo gleaming on its tail. Through the window, I could see my hometown sprawling below, unchanged yet somehow smaller than I remembered. The local press is requesting interviews, sir, my assistant Michael said, scrolling through his tablet. They're very interested in the hometown connection, especially since Skipline's launch here has broken all our previous records. I adjusted my custom-tailored suit, a far cry from the worn jeans I'd left in 10 years ago. No interviews, just the standard press release. But I knew it was only a matter of time. In a small town, news travels fast, especially when a local failure returns as a billionaire tech founder. The rumors started within hours of our landing. My sister Priya called first, the first time in nearly a decade. Arun? Her voice wavered. Is it true? Are you the founder of Skipline? I let the silence stretch. Yes. But how? Why didn't you tell us? Mom and Dad, they think about you every day. They still have your photo. The same photo they used to point at while telling everyone how their son betrayed the family. I kept my voice level. How's your medical practice, Priya? She hesitated. I actually quit last year. Burned out. I'm working part-time now, trying to figure out what I really want. That surprised me. Perfect, Priya, questioning her path. I'm sorry to hear that. No, I'm sorry, Arun. You were brave enough to choose your own way. I just followed the blueprint without thinking. Before I could respond, I heard commotion in the background. Our parents' voices. Is that him? Give me the phone. My father's voice, older but still commanding. Arun? Son. My heart clenched at the word son, the title he'd stripped from me a decade ago. Hello, Father. We saw the news. Your company, this Skipline. They're saying it's worth billions. $4.2 billion as of last month's valuation, I said quietly. We're going public next year. Silence. Then my mother's voice, thick with tears. Bida, please. Come home. Let us explain. I'm at the Grand Hotel. I cut in. Room 2401. If you want to talk, come by at 7 p.m. I hung up, staring out the hotel window at the town where I'd once been labeled a failure. My phone buzzed constantly, distant relatives, old classmates, family friends suddenly remembering my existence. I turned it off. At exactly 7 p.m., there was a knock at my suite door. I opened it to find my parents standing there, looking smaller than I remembered. My father's confident posture was gone, replaced by an uncertain slouch. My mother's hair had gone fully gray. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They entered slowly, taking in the luxurious suite with wide eyes. My mother gasped softly at the view of their town from the top floor. Successful businessmen indeed, my father said, attempting a smile. We were wrong, Arun. So wrong. If we had known. Known what? I interrupted. That I'd become rich. That I'd succeed despite you cutting me off. Would that have made my dreams more valid? No, Beta, my mother stepped forward. That you had such strength in you, such vision. I moved to the window, looking down at the busy streets below. 10 years ago, I needed parents. Not critics, not judges, just parents who believed in me. Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep that first year in London? How many times I nearly gave up? My father sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. We were wrong, he repeated. Our pride, our narrow vision of success, we let it blind us. Can you forgive us? I turned to face them. I didn't come back for forgiveness. I came because Skipline is expanding, and this town is part of our growth strategy. That's all. Please, my mother whispered. Give us a chance to be your parents again. I pulled out my phone, opening a photo gallery. This is my office in London, my team, the children's hospital wing I funded last year, the tech academy I started for underprivileged kids. I swiped through the images. All of this I built without your name, your connections, your approval. I needed to prove something, not to you, but to myself. And you have. My father stood up. You've proven us completely wrong. I'm so proud of you, son. Proud? I laughed softly. 10 years too late for that, isn't it? But looking at them, my father's trembling hands, my mother's tear-streaked face, I felt the anger of a decade slowly start to fade. Not because they were sorry now, but because I no longer needed their approval to know my worth. I have a dinner meeting, I said, checking my watch. But maybe we can have breakfast tomorrow. At that coffee shop on Main Street? They use Skipling now, no more waiting in line. My mother's face lit up with hope. My father nodded, eyes glistening. As they turned to leave, my father paused at the door. That hospital wing you built, does it need doctors? I raised an eyebrow. Are you offering? Maybe it's time I learned from my son, he said quietly, about choosing a new path. After they left, I stood at the window watching their car pull away. My phone buzzed, another notification of Skipline's stock price climbing. In my reflection, I saw not the failure they'd once declared me, but the man I'd chosen to become. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right, and sometimes, just sometimes, those who once pushed you away can learn to walk beside you on the path you fought so hard to build. The next morning, I watched through the coffee shop window as my parents approached. 10 years ago, I'd left this town with nothing but a dream and determination. Now I was back on my own terms, not as the son who failed to become a doctor, but as the man who succeeded in becoming himself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest success of all.
Mackenzie woke up feeling groggy, her mouth dry and bitter. She was disoriented and felt intensely thirsty and nauseous. There was a constant buzzing in her head that made it hard to tell what was real. At first, she couldn't figure out where she was. All she knew was that she was lying in a tight, small space. Panic set in when she tried to move and realized she was trapped in a narrow, tight area. She pushed against the barrier with her feet, but it wouldn't budge. Slowly, as her mind cleared up, she started to think clearly. She desperately wanted to call for help, but was unsure if it was really dark or if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Fear grew as she reached out and felt smooth fabric behind her. She touched it with a shaky hand and found it solid. Reality started to sink in. Was she in a coffin? Her heart raced and she struggled to breathe. She wanted to scream, but only a choked sound escaped her lips. Panic gripped her throat, making her feel paralyzed, as if she had been drugged against her will. A cruel trick she had unwittingly fallen victim to. Outside, the van carrying what looked like Mackenzie's coffin stopped, jolting slightly on the rough road through the cemetery. The driver's door slammed shut with a definitive thud, followed by the scraping of movement. Mackenzie's heart pounded as she vacillated between hope for rescue and overwhelming fear of what might happen next. As her coffin was carefully unloaded and placed on the ground, Mackenzie's anxiety peaked. She desperately hoped this was all a terrible joke, a cruel prank that would end in laughter. Put her here. Finally, she's where she belongs, a voice said with scorn. It was Sabrina, Mackenzie's friend, or so she had thought. The sting of betrayal cut deep. Why would Sabrina speak with such hostility? With a heavy heart, Mackenzie realized the truth. Paul and Sabrina weren't just acquaintances, they were partners in a sinister plan against her. Their pretended care and friendship had been a disguise for their true intentions. I can't believe we are finally done with this. Paul's voice cut through the air with chilling clarity. A faint breeze brushed against Mackenzie's face as Pride, the gravedigger, opened the coffin lid. The fresh air brought a small relief to her lungs, struggling against the effects of drugs. I've waited for this day for so long. She won't bother us anymore. Paul's words rang out sharply. Beside him, Sabrina held his hand tightly, their closeness now revealing their shared greed and malice rather than love. We're fortunate her father passed away last year. If he was still alive, we'd have had to deal with him too, Paul murmured cautiously, aware of the gravediggers nearby. Mackenzie felt a new wave of horror as she realized the extent of their planning and deception. In the midst of this grim scene and interruption, Richard's dog, a faithful companion to the cemetery's caretaker, began to whine and bark insistently at the coffin. His uneasy behavior added to the already tense atmosphere. "Shut your mud up!" Sabrina's voice pierced the tense air, breaking the solemn moment. "Can't you see we're having a moment?" "Sorry," Richard grumbled, scolding his dog. "Luke, quiet down." Inside the coffin, Mackenzie grappled with a storm of emotions, fear, betrayal, disbelief, all swirling inside her. She wanted to scream, to reveal she was conscious and confront her betrayers. But the risk was too great. Any movement, any sign of life might provoke Paul to take more drastic measures. So she lay still, a silent witness to the cruel fate they had planned for her. Paul's ruthless ambition was laid bare. His desire for a large inheritance had stripped away any semblance of decency, revealing a man capable of terrible deeds. The realization that he could dispose of the gravediggers as easily as he had plotted against his own wife chilled Mackenzie to the core. Beside her, Sabrina leaned over Mackenzie's unnervingly motionless body, muttering with detached disbelief, "Jesus. She doesn't even look human, more like a doll." "It's creepy." Sabrina's words were devoid of empathy, echoing the coldness of their situation. Paul, confident in his sinister plan, dismissed any concerns about an autopsy. "There's no close family left for Mackenzie in this city. She only had you as a friend," he told Sabrina. "And these drugs leave the system quickly. No expert will find anything suspicious. I've taken care of everything, and I didn't do this to fail over something trivial." His assurance was chilling, revealing how meticulously he had orchestrated their scheme. Mackenzie, overhearing their conversation, felt a surge of fury but quickly suppressed it. She knew any physical reaction, even something as small as sweating or blushing, could betray her feigned death and seal her fate. Paul then turned to Richard and Carter, the young apprentice of the seasoned gravedigger. "How much longer?" "About 20 minutes," they replied from inside the grave. "Let's get out of here," Paul declared, putting his arm around Sabrina. "No need to stick around to see how it all ends." Sabrina, her tone whiny and self-absorbed, complained, "I'm starving. Let's grab something to eat. I'm so tired from all of this," adjusting her stylish leather coat. Her attire, more suited for a fancy dinner than a solemn funeral, starkly contrasted with the cemetery's somber setting. Richard couldn't help but notice her extravagant appearance among the crosses and monuments. With a final look at Mackenzie's pale face resting in the soft blue satin of the coffin, Sabrina exchanged a smile with Paul. He settled the gravediggers and left, abandoning his wife's body and Richard's dog's persistent barking. A chilling sense of finality hung in the air, a stark reminder of how far greed and malice can drive people. The atmosphere at the gravesite was uneasy, amplified by the departing couple's cold demeanor. Carter, breaking the silence, voiced the unease that hung heavily in the air. "Strange people," he said, his voice tinged with confusion. They were so indifferent towards this woman. No flowers, no tears, no goodbyes. Richard, the seasoned gravedigger, watched as Paul's car disappeared in the distance. "I've seen a lot in my years here," he mused, a hint of sadness in his tone, "but this is rare. She must be an orphan or something." His attention then shifted to Luke, the large dog who had been unusually agitated. "Luke, get out of here," he scolded, but the dog's restlessness only grew. Without any of Mackenzie's relatives present, Luke's behavior became more erratic. He howled and barked incessantly at the coffin lid, as if driven by an unseen force. "Luke, what's gotten into you today? Get back out of there," Richard demanded, but the dog's behavior only intensified, as if urgently trying to convey a message beyond human comprehension. Richard, initially hoping Luke would climb out on his own, quickly realized the dog's agitation was more than just a random outburst. "What's wrong with you?" he growled, frustration evident. Inside the coffin, Mackenzie felt the weight of Luke landing above her. The dog's relentless barking and howling signified something urgent. In a moment of clarity, Mackenzie realized she could at least attempt to make a sound. Her feeble moan, though barely audible, was enough to reinforce Luke's determination. Alarmed by the unexpected noise, Richard's heart raced. "What is this now?" he thought, panic setting in. He commanded Luke to step back, and with cautious movements he squeezed into the grave, carefully avoiding the coffin. He lifted the lid and was struck with disbelief. There before him were the grey eyes of a woman thought to be dead. "Mother of God!" Richard exclaimed, recoiling in shock. As Mackenzie tried to speak, her words came out tangled and indistinct. "How on earth are you alive?" Richard blurted out, his voice a mix of concern and astonishment. He helped Mackenzie into a sitting position, their eyes locking, hers filled with fear. "Are they still here?" she whispered weakly, her voice trembling as tears rolled down her cheeks. "Who?" "Oh, those scoundrels," Richard nearly cursed, his anger evident. "We need to call the doctors. How do you feel?" "We need an ambulance right away," he said, his mind racing with what to do next. Mackenzie, gathering what little strength she had, extended her hand, signaling him to stop. "Don't, please," she implored. "We can't scare them away. If they find out I'm all right, just need some time, I guess," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. "All right, as you say. Let's get you out of here," Richard agreed, his tone now calmer but still full of concern. As Mackenzie emerged from the coffin, the reality of her near demise hit her. She wept, clinging to the earth, her hands grasping for support as she struggled to the surface, surrounded by the somber presence of crosses and portraits of the deceased. The grim reality of her situation sank in deeper. She realized with a heavy heart that she could have been one of them, lost and forgotten, if not for the miraculous intervention that saved her life. Her relief was profound yet tinged with the haunting knowledge of how close she had come to an undeserved end. Overwhelmed by the harrowing experience, Mackenzie pleaded with Richard, her voice trembling with desperation. "Take me away from here, please," she implored, squatting and covering her face with her hands, as if to shield herself from the grim reality that surrounded her. Richard, understanding the urgency of her request, paused only briefly to consider the situation. Mackenzie was clearly in a state of shock, and it wouldn't be right to ask her to wait while he dealt with the logistics of the disturbed grave and the relocation of the coffin. He resolved to handle everything early the next morning before anyone could notice the disturbance. Soon, Mackenzie found herself in the same van that had transported her to the cemetery, but now as a living, breathing passenger. The reality of her ordeal weighed heavily on her mind. Just a day ago, she had been having dinner with her husband, Paul, in their luxurious two-story house, a legacy from her parents. Now she grappled with the chilling realization that she had narrowly escaped death at his hands. She guessed that Paul had put something in her wine during their anniversary dinner to make her pass out without suspecting anything. She remembered their conversation from the night before. "It doesn't seem like you," she had said playfully, looking into Paul's eyes. "Usually, you pick the best restaurant with live music and everything." Paul had leaned in, kissed her, and said, "Don't start this now. It was hard to give it up." "I did it for you, by the way." Mackenzie had laughed, not knowing what was coming. "Yeah, I really appreciate your effort to please me," she had responded. "Being alone on such an important day is the best. You even let the chefs go early and cooked everything yourself." Now, those memories were ruined by the bitter taste of his deceit. She thought about Paul's words from the night before, each one now seeming like a well-planned lie. How long had he been planning this? Realizing that her close friend Sabrina was also involved made the betrayal even worse. How could she have betrayed her like that? These questions kept swirling in her mind, each one a painful reminder of the treachery she had narrowly escaped. Sabrina came from a middle-class background but always dreamed of a more glamorous life. When she got to university, she had a clear plan: make friends with wealthy and influential people. This strategy led her to Mackenzie. Mackenzie, who came from a wealthy family, was the perfect target for Sabrina's plan. At first, their friendship seemed real. They attended classes together, laughed at the same jokes, and talked for hours about their dreams and goals. But behind Sabrina's friendly smile, she had a different agenda. "Remember how we met, Mackenzie?" Sabrina would often say with a smile. "We were paired for that economics project, and I knew right then we'd be great friends." Mackenzie would laugh and reply, "Yes, and I thought you were the serious, studious type. Little did I know you were more interested in my family's summer house than my lecture notes." Their playful exchanges, once filled with the innocence of college days, now haunted Mackenzie as she faced the harsh truth about her friendship with Sabrina. Sabrina had always been more interested in what Mackenzie could provide socially and materially than in a genuine bond. This realization, following her near-death experience, cast a shadow over their past interactions, exposing Sabrina's deception and the emptiness of their so-called friendship. Still grappling with the shock of her recent ordeal, Mackenzie entered the watchman's hut. Her legs trembled, a physical reminder of the trauma she had just endured. She barely noticed the simple interior as she hurried to find a seat, her mind consumed by the betrayal she had narrowly escaped. Richard, always compassionate, went to make tea. "You'll start feeling better soon," he reassured her, his voice a soothing presence amid her turmoil. "Let me brew you some tea. I'd offer something stronger, but staying clear-headed is best right now. Plus, we shouldn't mix it with any drugs they might have used." Mackenzie rubbed her temples, her voice filled with distress. "My head is so foggy. My husband drugged me with something. I feel like my brain's been scrambled," she admitted. "You're the only one who knows what's happened to me, and I don't want anyone else to find out. I need your help. I hate to ask, but I need to borrow some money. I promise I'll pay you back. They were after my money. That's why they tried to kill me," she confessed, her voice steady despite the seriousness of her words. Richard stared at her, a mix of shock and sympathy in his eyes. In his years at the cemetery, he had seen many sides of human nature, but nothing as troubling as this. The idea of someone, especially a spouse, resorting to such a terrible act was hard for him to grasp. "Your husband sounds like a real scoundrel," he remarked, shaking his head in disbelief as he watched Mackenzie's distraught state. She looked visibly shaken, the weight of her ordeal evident in her trembling. "I'll lend you the money, don't worry, my dear. How could I leave you in this situation?" Richard assured her firmly, trying to provide some comfort. "But what's your plan now?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Mackenzie's determination solidified as she replied, "I'm not sure yet. But one thing's certain, that monster will pay for everything. I'll make sure they both face justice. They tried to kill me in such a cruel way." "How innocent I was," she lamented, her tears reflecting both lost innocence and newfound resolve. Sitting in the watchman's hut, processing the turmoil she had endured, Luke, the loyal dog who had played a vital role in her rescue, stirred from his spot on the floor. He approached Mackenzie and rested his heavy head on her lap, seeking comfort in his canine way. "What a good boy," Mackenzie said softly, gently stroking him between the ears. She smiled gratefully at him. "I forgot to thank you earlier." "You're the one who saved me," she acknowledged, addressing her furry rescuer. Luke wagged his tail happily, clearly appreciating the praise. "Luke is a clever one," Richard added with a proud smile, joining in to stroke the dog's black coat. "I've grown so fond of him in the 7 years we've been together. You wouldn't believe how small he was when I first found him on the streets," he reminisced fondly. Mackenzie glanced from Luke to Richard. "I think I'll stay at a hotel tonight." "This place is a bit too cozy for guests," she said, acknowledging the hut's simplicity. "Sure," Richard replied, rising and heading to his desk. He opened a drawer and took out his wallet. "Here," he said, handing Mackenzie some cash. "This should cover you for now. I'll call you a cab." That night, Mackenzie found herself in a rundown hotel, struggling to find sleep. The events of the previous day haunted her, leaving her afraid to close her eyes. Her mind raced with unsettling thoughts. What if Paul found out she had escaped and came after her? Could he and Sabrina be watching her right now? Above all, Mackenzie wrestled with the daunting task of exposing her husband and her deceitful friend. She knew she had to proceed carefully and strategically. After a restless night, as dawn broke, Mackenzie finally managed to rest, her determination solidifying. She now knew what steps she had to take. Returning to the cemetery the next day, Mackenzie headed straight for Richard's hut, but found it empty. Walking among the graves, a shiver ran down her spine as she contemplated the horrifying possibility that she could have ended up as one of the silent residents of this solemn place. The thought of her life nearly ending at just 29 years old was a chilling realization, strengthening her resolve to confront the injustice she had faced. Mackenzie called out for Richard, and Luke eagerly responded, his joy evident in playful jumps and wagging tail. "Hello, good boy," she greeted warmly, petting his shiny fur affectionately. Following Luke, she found Richard diligently working, clearing weeds that had grown over an old grave. "You're back," Richard remarked, not stopping his work as he greeted her with a chuckle. Mackenzie smiled in return. "Yes, I'm back, and I need your help again." Mackenzie joined Richard in awkwardly pulling at the thick grass, showing her inexperience but finding the physical activity calming. Richard, noticing her struggle, handed her a small hoe. "Use this instead. Just be careful not to hit your feet." "So, what's the plan?" he asked. Mackenzie laid out her strategy. "We need to scare Paul. You'll call him and tell him you know his secret, that you saw me wake up and that I'm alive. If he denies it, we'll say your partner knows too. That should push Paul to try and silence you. When you meet him, demand a large sum for your silence and record every word. Paul's a talker, so he'll probably say something incriminating." "Sounds like a plan," Richard agreed, impressed with her approach. "Let me finish up here first." After about half an hour, they were ready to make the call. Richard took a deep breath and dialed Paul's number, waiting for him to answer. "Hello, it's Richard. We need to meet and talk about how you buried your wife alive. I'll see you at my hut today at 4:00 p.m. I'll also text you the amount of money you need to bring to keep me quiet," he stated, hanging up after Paul's brief, startled response. "So, what did he say?" Mackenzie asked anxiously, sensing the tension in the air. "Well, he only said okay. He must have been so scared that he didn't even try to negotiate," Richard replied. Before putting their plan into action, they involved a police officer. The officer arrived promptly and questioned Mackenzie in detail about her experience and the strategy they intended to use. As the clock ticked closer to the agreed time, tension filled the air. They carefully laid trap poised to spring. Mackenzie's ordeal had reached a critical point, and as she recounted the harrowing details to Officer Andrews, his astonishment was palpable. "So, your husband planned to kill you?" he asked, his tone a mix of surprise and disbelief. "Yeah, he's quite cunning. You'll see for yourself soon," Mackenzie replied, her voice steady with determination born from betrayal. With Officer Andrews' help, she positioned herself discreetly around the hut, waiting for Paul's arrival, ensuring they remained hidden from view. Paul, cautious and alert, scanned the surroundings upon arrival to ensure he wasn't being watched. He greeted Richard with a handshake before stepping into the hut. "Impressive old man," Paul remarked with a hint of superiority as he closed the door. "Took you all day to decide to blackmail me." Richard, struggling to contain his anger, replied calmly, "Well, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I suppose." Paul, displaying his usual arrogance, handed a bag to Richard. "Keep quiet about this," he warned. "If any of this gets out, you'll be my prime suspect, and you'll end up in a new grave." His threat was as chilling as it was direct. Richard, barely concealing his emotions, asked, "Why did you do that to her?" "It must have been a horrific death. She was moving in that coffin. She must have woken up underground." Paul, showing no remorse, casually admitted his mistake. "I hoped she'd die in her sleep. Seems the drugs wore off sooner. But it doesn't matter now. It's done. You're my partner in crime, so if you try to expose me, you'll face the consequences too." Paul's confession was chillingly indifferent. Mackenzie was a bold, spoiled brat. "She never treated me as an equal, so she got what she deserved," he declared dismissively. He turned to leave, opening the door, only to freeze in place. Standing before him were Officer Andrews and Mackenzie, very much alive. "Nowhere to run," Mackenzie stated, her voice filled with a mix of triumph and anger as she struck her husband across the face. Remaining composed, Paul pushed past them and sprinted toward his car. "Luke, get him!" Richard commanded. The loyal black dog lunged at Paul, knocking him down and grabbing onto his leg, tearing at his pants. "Get this damn dog off me!" Paul shouted, trying desperately to shake Luke loose. Turning to Richard, Mackenzie asked urgently, "Do we have the recording of Sabrina?" Richard smiled confidently, pulling out his phone. "You doubt me?" "I've got everything." These criminals won't escape justice. His words rang out with assurance, a vow that the truth would prevail. With Paul and Sabrina arrested, Mackenzie finally found herself in a place of safety and relief. The weight of her harrowing ordeal began to lift, allowing her to focus on giving her statement and preparing for the upcoming trial. She made a point to avoid unnecessary encounters with Paul and Sabrina, unwilling to endure their deceit or false displays of remorse. Paul remained unapologetically greedy and cruel, while Sabrina resorted to pleading for forgiveness. "Mackenzie, please forgive me," she begged, grabbing Mackenzie's sleeve during an unexpected encounter at the prosecutor's office. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Please believe me," Sabrina continued tearfully. However, Mackenzie remained stoic, showing no emotion in response to Sabrina's desperate pleas. "Please keep her away from me," Mackenzie requested from the nearby officer. "I don't want to see her." Returning to her parents' home provided a sanctuary for Mackenzie. The first thing she did was surrender to a deep, restorative sleep. Despite her fears that sleep might evade her after such a traumatic experience, the knowledge that Paul and Sabrina were no longer a threat allowed her to drift off with ease. During moments of quiet reflection, Mackenzie recognized the pivotal role played by Richard and his loyal dog Luke in saving her life and ensuring justice. They had become her unexpected guardians, stepping into her life during its darkest hour and guiding her back to safety. Their bravery and quick thinking had not only spared her from a tragic fate, but also helped ensure that those who wished her harm faced the consequences of their actions. As the turmoil surrounding her ordeal settled, Mackenzie felt a deep desire to express her gratitude to those who had been instrumental in her survival. She made a decision to visit Richard, the gravedigger who had played such a crucial role in her rescue. Along with her, she brought gifts to show her appreciation: a new jacket for Richard and a collar, along with treats for his faithful companion Luke. As Mackenzie approached the cemetery, her heart swelled with a mix of emotions. The place that had nearly been her final resting spot now held a profound significance for her. Spotting Richard amidst his usual duties, she approached him with a warm smile. "Richard," she called out gently, not wanting to startle him. Richard turned around, surprised and pleased to see her. "Mackenzie, what brings you back here?" he asked, his face breaking into a welcoming grin. "I wanted to thank you properly this time," Mackenzie replied, offering him the jacket. "I hope this keeps you warm during those cold nights." Richard accepted the jacket, his eyes reflecting deep gratitude. "Thank you, Mackenzie. This means a lot," he said, feeling the fabric between his fingers. "And this," Mackenzie continued, revealing the collar and treats, "is for Luke." At the mention of his name, Luke trotted over, his tail wagging in excitement. Mackenzie knelt down to fasten the new collar around his neck and offered him a treat, which he eagerly accepted. "He's been a true hero," she said warmly, scratching Luke behind the ears. "He sure is," Richard agreed, watching the interaction with a smile. "He's got a knack for sensing when something's wrong." In the midst of their conversation, Mackenzie felt a surge of warmth and gratitude towards Richard, realizing just how profoundly he had impacted her life. She wanted to show her appreciation beyond just gifts. "Richard, I was wondering," she began, her voice sincere, "if I could invite you to dinner. It's the least I can do to thank you properly for everything." Richard, taken aback by the invitation, hesitated for a moment, his usual reticence evident. "Oh, I don't know, Mackenzie. I'm not much of a dinner guest," he replied modestly. Mackenzie smiled warmly, understanding Richard's initial reluctance. "Please, it would mean a lot to me. You've done so much, and I just want to show my appreciation in a small way. It doesn't have to be anything formal." After a brief pause, a gentle smile broke through Richard's reserved exterior. "Well, in that case, how could I refuse such a kind offer? I'd be honored to join you for dinner, Mackenzie." As they dined in the cozy, inviting atmosphere of the restaurant, Mackenzie couldn't help but ponder the stark contrast between Richard's gentle demeanor and his somber occupation. Leaning forward, she asked softly, "How did you end up working in such an unusual place? It seems so different from who you are." Richard paused, his eyes reflecting a distant memory. "Well, Mackenzie, my life 35 years ago was a world apart from what it is now," he began, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "I was married to Natalie, a wonderful woman with the kindest heart. We had a little boy, Johnny. He was just 2 years old at the time." Mackenzie listened intently, sensing the profound sadness in Richard's voice as he shared his past. "Natalie was studying to be a teacher, and I worked in construction. We were just a regular young family full of dreams and aspirations," Richard continued, his voice tinged with nostalgia. He paused, gathering his thoughts before delving deeper into his memories. One day, we were returning from a trip to the mountains, celebrating Natalie's graduation. She had just finished her degree and was on the verge of starting her career. Richard's eyes clouded with sorrow as he recounted the tragic accident. It was raining heavily and the roads were slippery. I was driving and I lost control of the truck. It crashed into a tree on the passenger side, right where Natalie was sitting. Mackenzie's heart went out to him as she listened, understanding the weight of the tragedy he had endured. Natalie, she didn't survive the crash, Richard continued, his voice heavy with emotion. Johnny was safe, strapped in his seat between us. But my world shattered that day. His voice trembled slightly, the pain still vivid even after so many years. The worst part was what came after. They'd found traces of alcohol in my system. Natalie's aunt, who never approved of me, convinced everyone that I was responsible for the accident. The guilt, the grief, it was overwhelming, he confessed, his eyes downcast. Mackenzie reached out and placed a comforting hand on Richard's arm, silently conveying her empathy for his painful memories. Mackenzie reached across the table and gently placed her hand on Richard's. "I'm so sorry, Richard. Losing your wife must have been incredibly hard," she said softly. Richard looked at her, his eyes meeting hers. "Thank you, Mackenzie. After Natalie died, my life changed completely. I lost more than just her. It led me on a surprising path that eventually brought me to work at the cemetery. It's a place where I find peace and can think about that tragic day." Richard had been drinking a few beers that day. He believed the wet road caused the accident, but he never tried to argue against the accusations. The guilt he felt was immense, no matter what had really happened. He accepted the blame, overwhelmed by the tragedy and how others judged him. Natalie's aunt Carla took custody of Richard's young son Johnny. This added more sadness to Richard's already heavy heart. Shortly after, Richard faced the harsh reality of the legal system. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for reckless driving that caused Natalie's death. Facing this devastating verdict, Richard stood alone, accepting his fate quietly. After his release, Richard returned to a community that saw him with disapproval and suspicion. The once friendly neighborhood now greeted him with cold stares and whispered judgments. Johnny, raised by Carla, remained out of Richard's reach. Richard longed to reconnect with his son, to explain and embrace him, but Johnny grew up believing Richard was responsible for his mother's death, a belief deeply ingrained and hard to change. Years later, when Richard tried to contact his now adult son, he received a letter from Carla instead of Johnny. "John is an adult now, and you killed his mother," Carla's letter bluntly stated. These words crushed Richard, dashing any hope of reconciliation. The rejection plunged Richard deeper into sadness. He withdrew from the world, consumed by sorrow and regret. Sometimes, the isolation in his small house became unbearable, and he yearned for the numbness he felt during his prison days. Richard looked out of his window on a rainy day and saw an old tree in his yard. He had planted it when Johnny was born, hoping they would play under its branches someday. But that never happened. On this rainy day, Richard noticed a small black puppy under the tree, shivering in the cold. He watched, hoping someone would come for it. As the rain got heavier, the puppy got wetter. After waiting for 30 minutes with no one coming for the puppy, Richard felt a strong urge to go outside. He hurried into the rain and picked up the trembling puppy, bringing it inside his warm house. He shared his food with the puppy, who soon fell asleep contentedly in his lap. Petting the little dog, Richard felt a change inside him. That day marked the end of his loneliness. He named the puppy Luke. As Luke grew, he became lively, often barking to go outside. Richard, still preferring solitude and missing Natalie deeply, would take Luke to visit her grave early in the mornings, away from others. It was during one of these visits that Richard saw a job ad for a cemetery guard and gravedigger. The job seemed perfect for him. It offered physical work, little interaction with people, and most importantly, it kept him close to Natalie's resting place. Mackenzie was deeply moved by Richard's story. She got up from her seat and sat beside him without saying a word, holding his hand to show her support and understanding. After a lovely dinner together, Mackenzie drove Richard back home safely. Once Richard was inside, Mackenzie headed towards her own home, her mind buzzing with thoughts. Besides running her successful business, she now had a new, intriguing mission. This task had come up unexpectedly during their dinner conversation and filled her with excitement and determination. 2 months later, Mackenzie arrived in a charming southern town in search of John Clark, Richard's son. She went to what she thought was his last known address, but found no one home when she knocked. Planning to wait until evening for the resident's return, she went to a local diner to pass the time and have a meal. As Mackenzie drove past a local high school, she noticed a group of teenagers raising money for a cause. Intrigued and feeling charitable, she stopped to make a contribution. 2 excited teenage girls approached her car with collection boxes. "We're raising money for our teacher, Mr. Clark," one of them said enthusiastically, while the other laughed. Mackenzie drove off initially, but soon parked nearby. She returned to the girls and donated some money before asking about their fundraiser. "Oh, Mr. Clark is our math teacher. He's really nice, and we want to support him," the girls explained, playfully bantering with each other. "She's asking about the fundraiser." One of the girls laughed, turning to Mackenzie. "Sorry, she's just excited about skipping math class today. We're raising money for Mr. Clark's mom. She's in the hospital fighting cancer. We all really care about Mr. Clark." Mackenzie felt puzzled. She was looking for John Clark, whose mother she believed had died in a car accident years ago. Something didn't add up. Collecting herself, Mackenzie asked the girls, "Could you take me to meet Mr. Clark?" Soon, Mackenzie found herself in the school hallway, waiting nervously as John Clark's class ended. When the bell rang, teenagers poured out of the classroom. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to meet the son Richard had lost so many years ago. She introduced herself to John as he emerged from the classroom. Mackenzie chose her words carefully, mindful of the sensitive nature of their connection. She avoided revealing her full knowledge of his father, opting for a more general introduction. Gradually, Mackenzie began telling Richard's story to John, observing as his expression shifted from curiosity to sadness, then to anger. John seemed unsettled, asking why Mackenzie had sought him out and what she wanted from him. When he asked about the importance of their meeting to her, Mackenzie realized she couldn't avoid mentioning her own traumatic experience. John listened with surprise as Mackenzie recounted her near death and how Richard had saved her life. As she explained her mission, John's expression turned hesitant. He shared that he was currently caring for his sick Aunt Clara and struggling to pay for her medical care. Seeing an opportunity, Mackenzie made a proposal. She offered to cover all of Clara's medical expenses if John agreed to meet with his father, Richard, and hear his side of the story. Mackenzie's offer came from a desire to help Richard reunite with his son and from gratitude for her life, which she owed to Richard's actions. On a warm spring day during a school break, John drove for hours to a town he barely remembered leaving as a baby. He was meeting Mackenzie, and together they headed to the cemetery where Richard worked. Arriving at the cemetery, they saw Richard busy with his work, diligently tending to the grounds. His dog Luke basked nearby in the sunshine. As John and Mackenzie approached, John looked to Mackenzie, unsure. She nodded reassuringly. It was time. Richard noticed them and looked up, his face brightening with a big smile upon seeing Mackenzie. "Well, look who's here again. What's the surprise this time?" he asked with a chuckle, clearly happy to see her. After a warm embrace from Mackenzie, Richard's gaze turned to John. He studied him for a moment, then turned back to Mackenzie with a teasing grin. "New boyfriend?" he joked. Mackenzie was taken aback by Richard's comment and glanced at John, blushing slightly. "Not exactly, at least not yet," she replied, her tone light but with a hint of seriousness. John raised an eyebrow, surprised by her response. Mackenzie's smile faded, replaced by a calm expression. Stepping forward, she gently took Richard's hand, her smile returning warmly as she looked into his eyes. "It's always wonderful to see you, Richard," she said. Then she turned to John, smiling at him. "This man is an incredible math teacher. His name is John Clark, and he's your son, Richard." Richard's face showed a mix of disbelief and shock. His eyes moved to John, who was visibly emotional, standing just a few feet away. Richard stood still, as if time had frozen. His eyes locked onto John's, afraid to blink, fearing his own overwhelming emotions. He nervously scratched his rough palm, thoughts and feelings racing through his mind. For years, he had wondered about his son's whereabouts and well-being. Now the answer stood before him. John was grappling with a mix of emotions. He had spent years resenting the man before him, fueled by misunderstandings. But faced with the truth and seeing his father on the brink of tears, John's perceptions began to shift. Mackenzie, sensing the charged silence between them, decided to step in. "Maybe you two should go ahead and hug it out," she gently encouraged. Her words broke the tension. John laughed through his tears, feeling a wave of relief. He approached his father and embraced him tightly, feeling years of separation and misunderstanding melt away in their shared hug. In that embrace, years of pain, regret, and lost time seemed to dissolve. It was a moment of redemption and reunion for Richard, and a moment of discovery and reconciliation for John. Richard, who had kept his emotions in check, felt overwhelmed by his son's warm embrace. Tears ran down his cheeks as he held John, feeling the connection he had longed for all those lonely years. He gently touched John's back, marveling at how the little boy he remembered had grown into a strong man. "I've waited my whole life for this moment, son," Richard managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. John, equally moved, expressed his regret. "I'm so sorry, Dad," he said, feeling guilty for believing misconceptions about his father without seeking the truth himself. Richard understood John's feelings well. He knew John had been too young to understand everything and had formed his opinions based on what others had told him. Meanwhile, Luke, Richard's loyal dog, had nestled into Mackenzie's lap, sensing the moment's significance. She hugged him affectionately, kissing his head gently. Luke looked up at Mackenzie with understanding eyes. The rest of the afternoon unfolded peacefully in the cemetery. John and Richard visited Nathalie's grave together, sharing a moment of reflection and remembrance. Afterwards, John helped Richard with his work, catching up on lost time as they pulled weeds together. Recognizing the importance of father and son bonding, Mackenzie took Luke for a walk. As the day neared its end, Mackenzie invited them for dinner at her home, eager to celebrate the newfound connection between Richard and John. Luke, who had grown attached to Mackenzie, hesitated to leave her side. Smiling, she asked if she could bring him along in her car, a suggestion Richard warmly accepted. Mackenzie had inherited her father's business and the large house that came with it, but chose a simpler life compared to her wealthy upbringing. Her father used to employ staff for the house, but Mackenzie preferred to manage things herself whenever possible. That evening, she personally set the dinner table, creating a cozy atmosphere without the help of Gloria, the housekeeper, whom she had encouraged to take a few days off. Having a housekeeper was practical due to the house's size, a testament to her father's dreams. Dinner was a delightful experience with lively conversation, shared laughter, and the joy of newfound connections. Richard expressed heartfelt gratitude to Mackenzie for reuniting him with his son and allowing them to reconcile. As the evening turned to night, John prepared to leave with his car keys in hand. Mackenzie, Richard, and John lingered outside, cherishing the final moments of their gathering. "Tonight meant more to me than I can put into words," Richard said, his voice full of emotion. "Mackenzie, without your kindness—" He glanced at John. "This reunion might never have happened." John nodded, grateful. "I can't thank you enough. Today has changed everything for me." Mackenzie smiled warmly. "I'm just happy I could help bring you two together. It's been a beautiful evening." As John got into his car, he paused, looking back at Mackenzie and Richard. "I'll be back to visit soon. This isn't goodbye, just see you later," he said with a hopeful smile. "Drive safe, son," Richard called out proudly, his smile wide. As John drove home, his mind raced with conflicting emotions. Discovering the truth about his father, Richard, had shaken his world, and now he faced the daunting task of confronting his Aunt Carla. She had been like a mother to him, but had also perpetuated the lies that kept him estranged from his father for so long. John struggled with feelings of betrayal, yet he couldn't ignore the love and care Carla had shown him over the years. Mackenzie's gesture of covering Carla's medical bills had further complicated John's feelings. It was an act of kindness that had helped Carla recover and return home, adding another layer to John's internal turmoil. When he arrived home, Carla awaited him, her eyes filled with silent remorse as he entered. "Please forgive me," she whispered softly, her voice heavy with regret. John remembered Richard's words, "No matter what, it's all in the past now. She took care of you and provided things I couldn't. Forgive her, son." These words echoed in John's mind as he looked at Carla. He realized that forgiveness was not just about accepting apologies, but also about letting go of resentment and moving forward. With those words resonating in his mind, John chose not to respond verbally. Instead, he took a moment and then walked slowly towards Carla. He embraced her, conveying his forgiveness through the embrace. It was a hug filled with understanding, acceptance, and a readiness to move forward from the past. As time went on, John felt increasingly drawn to his father, Richard, and their growing relationship. His visits became more frequent, something he cherished deeply. Whenever he visited Richard, he always made a point to stop by Mackenzie's as well. Their bond, formed in extraordinary circumstances, continued to strengthen. During one visit, Richard couldn't help but notice John's extra enthusiasm whenever Mackenzie was mentioned. Teasingly, he remarked, "Seems like you're more excited to see Mackenzie than your old man." John blushed at the remark, acknowledging the truth in his father's words. His relationship with Mackenzie had evolved beyond friendship. Before long, they began dating, their connection growing deeper each day. For Richard, witnessing his son find happiness brought immense joy. It was as if his life, once shadowed by darkness and despair, was now unfolding on a path illuminated by light and hope. Richard often found himself reflecting on the serendipity that led him to his job at the cemetery. What had initially felt like a retreat from the world had unexpectedly brought him closer to God, reunited him with his son, and witnessed the blossoming of a new love. "Thank God for leading me to this job," Richard would quietly murmur to himself. "It's brought more blessings than I could have ever imagined." Watching his son and Mackenzie together, Richard felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The cemetery, a place traditionally associated with endings, had paradoxically become a place of new beginnings for him and his family. It was a poignant reminder that life, despite its complexities, always held the potential for redemption and joy. Standing before Natalie's grave with a fresh bouquet of flowers in hand, Richard wore a gentle smile. The vibrant colors of the blooms contrasted beautifully with the solemnity of the gravestone, symbolizing the renewed lease on life Richard had discovered. Speaking softly as if Natalie could hear him, he shared his newfound happiness. "I found happiness again, Natalie. I wish you could see how everything has turned around." With a final glance at the grave, Richard turned and walked away, his steps lighter than they had been in years. He carried with him the warmth of renewed relationships and the promise of many more joyful days ahead. The sun bathed him in its gentle glow, mirroring the lightness he felt in his soul, a soul that, against all odds, had rediscovered happiness.